Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellow Cat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Today we have new amazing stories, so subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. Let's get started. What prompted you to resign from your job on the spot? I was working as a sysadmin for a financial tech company which did credit card processing. I kinda knew it was an S show when I started because the week before I did, they had a VM die with a corrupt disk and found out that they hadn't actually been backing anything up for 3 years because the backup server's disk was full and they had no monitoring on it. Fixing their backups became my first priority upon starting because the rest of the team was heavily overworked due to upper management dumping way too much on them and refusing to allocate budget to hire enough people. I even got chewed out a couple of times by management for submitting timesheets for overtime because they expect us to work 12-hour days without overtime. What got me to quit, though, wasn't directly related to the above. You see, without talking to my team, who was actually in charge of setting up, managing, and securing servers, some people in my engineering had set up an alternate version of our production infrastructures in AWS and changed the software shipped to customers to talk to it. Only they hadn't bothered with things like changing administrator passwords from default. My team only found out about this when they came screaming to us that all of production was down. We looked at our monitoring, went, WTF are you talking about? No, it's not. And they went, not that, the stuff in AWS. Turns out that every single server had been compromised and most had been turned into crypto miners, which AWS then shut down. After explaining what happened and what was wrong with this to both the CEO and CTO, we were eventually able to force them to switch back to using the managed, secure systems, which we had, which would actually pass a PCI DSS audit. About 2 weeks after that happened, all of our infrastructure shut down. This was because we used Amazon for our DNS and our account had been compromised. This, it turns out, was because 3 years prior, the CEO had hard-coded an AWS access token into our server software as part of an aborted feature. When the aforementioned insecure servers were compromised, someone grabbed the software and found that token in it, which gave them enough access to figure out what they needed to fully compromise the account. This outage lasted for several hours because the only admin contact on the AWS account was a former employee who hadn't been working there for 1.5 years. We were eventually able to track him down and call him to get AWS to restore our control, but by then, the damage was done. A couple of days later, we had a thorough RFW meeting, identified exactly what happened, how it happened, and steps to take to prevent it in the future, and the CEO signed off on our conclusion and agreed to implement our recommendations. The next Tuesday, during our weekly all-hands, the CEO announced to the entire company that the outage had been caused because the systems team hadn't properly secured the servers running in AWS, allowing our credentials to leak to hackers, and that the only policy change being made was canceling annual bonuses for the systems team as punishment for not preventing this. By the time our manager got back to his desk, he had 3 resignation letters on it, and I was already headed for the door. I work as a software engineer, was employed as a tech lead by a company. After 6 months, the manager, who had worked there for more than 5 years, quits. They needed to appoint a new manager, but they were having problems locating the ideal applicant. Now that I don't have a manager, all of the responsibility falls on me. I reasoned that it would be beneficial for me to learn from the experience, increase my value to the company, and help me receive a higher evaluation in the future. The issue was that I wasn't given any KT after the manager resigned because I wasn't his direct replacement. I persisted, nevertheless attempting to get the hang of it. The primary issue at hand was that while I was taking on all the duties, I had neither authority nor trust. When I, the new kid, kept asking the senior staff members about their work, some of them became irritated. The CEO then brought me in on my birthday last month to discuss why the project hadn't advanced to the point where the former manager had predicted it would. I gave him an explanation. I displayed the mail trails. The former manager attempted to entirely alter the entire tech stack in an effort to strengthen it. The elder folks had a lot of rework to do. Anon, be that as it may, you cannot expect me to take the word of a new guy on this, and I have to trust the people who have been with us longer, the CEO adds, glancing at me at the conclusion of my speech. Dude, I'm not asking you to trust me, I responded. I'm going to present you with all the data, and I want you to decide for yourselves. Since you're not tech savvy, I know you're having problems grasping this, so you should either put your trust in me or get someone you can rely on to ask me these questions. He was outraged by this for some reason. He then says, you have 30 days to show me some output. At the end of that time, you can turn in your resignation if you cannot justify what you've been doing for the last 6 months. That truly left me with no other option. No one can possibly solve the issues that have been caused over the last 8 years in the next 30 days, and I refuse to accept responsibility for something that is beyond my control, I uttered. I'll be sending in my resignation shortly. Regards. I then turned off my phone, went home, sent my resignation, contacted a couple more organizations that had been attempting to hire me, and went to bed. I had numerous missed calls, texts, and emails from individuals from the current organization as well as from businesses I had phoned when I woke up and turned on my phone. I called the CTO of the present organization to find out what was going on after returning the calls to the new company and gathering a few proposals. He claims that the CEO told him that although I had said some hurtful things to him, he was prepared to overlook them if I acknowledged my errors and made an effort to correct them. I told him no, that I would be working with them for the next 2 weeks as part of my notice period, and that he should take advantage of this time to obtain KT from me, as I won't be answering any calls or emails after that. The time is almost up, and they still haven't found a replacement for me. Turns out I was making way less money than anyone else willing to work at a similar skill set, and the new company is offering me a great raise and a joining bonus in addition to the opportunity to move to my ideal city. So all in all, a nice birthday gift for me. I managed this great cafe/bar, and my interview was having wine with the owner and chatting. Unpretentious atmosphere, local artwork on the walls which he sold for free, indie music for conversation, etc. One employee was in a band and often went on tour, so she always made sure his job was ready when he returned. After 3 years, she fell pregnant with twins and decided to become a stay-at-home mom, selling the home to a young man who bought it for his fiancée. Nice gift, no? However, it became clear that he did this because she couldn't work because even the simplest chores were beyond her. I taught her how to use the coffee machine in 4 weeks, she offered her coworkers gratis in the evenings, and she gave up on the panini machine. After mastering the coffee machine, she stated that they were remodeling, so we had to take a week off unpaid or use our holiday time. Everyone had to use holiday time. Week later, we returned to find white walls with enormous TVs blasting dance music and a 12-table space so loud we couldn't hear anything. When we examined the rotas, I lost 10 hours a week and the band guy 20. We naturally wondered, WTF? She said she could operate the place without us, so slashed hours. We requested if they could delay the new rotas by a month so we could find other work. I had a second job that wanted me full-time, but the band man didn't. She said she didn't have to give us notice because we didn't have a contract. As I was angry, I pulled off my apron, put my keys on the counter, and stated I didn't have to give notice because we didn't have a contract. Then left, never returned. Within 3 months, it closed. What is your silliest and most ridiculous HOA story? This took place today. As an attorney, I represent a builder of custom homes who owns several lots in a semi-rural community. Many elderly residents of the HOA utilize it as a means of halting development. HOA regulations limit use to residential purposes. My client's application for a construction permit is denied on the grounds that it is commercial to construct a model home. This argument is entirely incorrect and overlooks well-established case law. I'm hired to try to make them understand. Eventually, have to deal with their lawyer. He's illiterate and roughly 80 years old, background in criminal law, but she hasn't been in active practice for almost 15 years. He sends a foolish letter that repeats their defense of commercial use. We had a phone conversation today. Before I file a lawsuit, I offer him one more chance to reconsider his mind. He mumbles something, then ends our conversation. I did title checks on all of the board members' homes as well as his. Each and every one of them was a prototype house constructed by a builder and given to the present owners within the last 10 years. I just wrote the following in approximately 4 lines. Please find attached exhibits A to F to my plaintiff's original petition, which I am getting ready to file tomorrow. The 6 deeds that you and the HOA board used to get titled to your XYZ subdivision property are shown in these exhibits, and they are all subject to the limitations mentioned in your letter of January 11th, 2019. 2 hours later, my customer obtained his building permits. After leaving the ranch, my family lived in a trailer park for a while before moving into a real house in a community with a homeowners association. Because he's an American redneck who is of red blood, my dad declined to sign their contract. Up until they tried to dictate to him how to run his household, everything was okay. This took place in a community where, unless you're under contract, you are not legally required to follow the HOA's rules. We refused to pay dues, which infuriated them. This led the HOA president to take all the necessary steps to convince us that paying dues was a simpler option than putting up with their nonsense. They informed him that our autos were to be kept in the garage and not in our driveway. The issue is that we only have a 2-vehicle garage, yet we have my dad's car, my mom's car, my car, and the work truck. However, my father is a kind and understanding man. We thus parked our autos on the street. We parked in the front yard because they were trying to get at him for that. Subsequently, they attempted to approach him with the agreement and demand that he sell 2 of the cars. In reply, he said, "I didn't sign any trash. Please leave my property immediately." So started the conflict between House Playpen and the HOA. My dad picked up my brother and me, and we headed to Home Depot to acquire supplies since my mom wanted a garden much like we had back at the ranch. After we return and begin the preparatory work, a man approaches and inquires as to what we're doing. Constructing a garden. I plan to build elevated boxes with shelves near the door and install flower beds along the remaining portion of the front. How do you feel? We start working when the man says he thinks it sounds good and turns to go. After 15 minutes, my mother exits the house and says she spoke with the president of the HOA. Her father urges her to shut up. They then visit him to inform him that the HOA must approve any landscaping tasks he wants to do. Following a brief altercation, my father adopts a military demeanor and bellows, "Get off my property!" Mr. HOA then decided not to pursue the matter further. Although other incidents had happened while we had been there for roughly 8 months, this was the first time the police had been contacted. We were preparing for a hunting trip. On a Friday night, we loaded up the work vehicle with all of our equipment and supplies and headed back and forth from the house, locking our guns in the gun rack. My dad is informed by a police car that they received a report of armed guys robbing a residence while we review the checklist one last time to make sure everything's in order. After my dad describes the issue, the officer is about to get in his car and drive away when a woman, who later reveals herself to be the wife of the HOA president, they lived a little distance down the street, comes outside and questions him about why he isn't taking action. He can't just let us walk around with guns, she insists. As the officer explains that the weapons are securely stowed for transportation, that we are able to carry them because it is our private property, and that my father is licensed to carry a firearm, despite all of this, she becomes increasingly agitated. "Linda, you're trespassing right now, and if I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times. Stay the H off my property," my dad says to her, getting agitated with her at this point. After telling us all to calm down, the policeman sent Mrs. HOA back home and sent the rest of us on our way. After a few more months, we've been there for over a year, and throughout the summer, we're renovating almost half the house. We've had enough police calls for nothing to believe that the police are on our side. While renovating a bathroom, we removed the toilet and placed it next to the garbage can. Everything but the toilet was taken by the garbage collectors when they arrived. It was undoubtedly over the weight limit, but fair is fair. We ask the city how to get rid of it over the phone, and they tell us that we must transport it to the landfill ourselves. When we take the tile and copper and get back to work, well, figure we'll get it. A knock on the door occurs around an hour later. Only Mr. and Mrs. HOA are allowed to open it, thanks to Dad. We're informed that leaving the restroom outside is not permitted. My dad says he'll relocate it once we finish up for the day. He understands. This is insufficient. They want that the toilet be moved right away. My dad says okay and asks me to assist him in moving the toilet so that it becomes the focal point of our backyard. The toilet would remain there for as long as he wished, he assured them. This time there was no shouting or even an order to leave his land. Only my 6'4" bearded construction worker father laughing his A off at these two as they lost their D-minds. Upon their departure, he put an out-of-order sign for the restroom, got us ice cream, and we ended our workday. But hold on, yet more is here too. A few days later, I hear police sirens outside as I wake up. I get up and go outdoors in my pajamas to investigate. As I witness something that still makes me happy, the police arresting Mr. and Mrs. HOA for attempted theft of a toilet as my father, clad in dog tags, combat boots, boxers, and a bathrobe stolen from Motel 6, smokes a cigarette and laughs from atop his porcelain throne. Guys, thank you for all the support and likes. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. See you next time.